Working the night shift means being awake when most people aren't. But in that silence, small sounds stand out,
and certain moments don't have clear explanations. In this video, you'll hear 3 scary horror stories that happen during night shifts, moments that started like ordinary work hours and slowly turned into something far more unsettling.
If you enjoy horror stories like this, like the video and subscribe.
And if you want to support the channel even more, super thanks are always appreciated.
I work the night shift for the State Turnpike Authority. My specific assignment is Plaza 47. It is a remote 4-lane toll checkpoint surrounded by thousands of acres of dense, state-protected pine forests. The plaza is situated nearly an hour's drive from the nearest major municipality. During the hours of midnight to 6 in the morning, I am the only attendant on duty. I manage the single cash lane, while the automated electronic pass lanes handle the sparse commercial trucking traffic. The physical isolation of the job is a factor you simply acclimate to. But extreme weather events tend to amplify that isolation significantly. On October 14th of last year, a severe atmospheric river event stalled over our region. The rain was torrential, falling in solid, blinding sheets that reduced visibility on the highway to less than 30 feet. The wind was registering sustained gusts of 40 miles per hour, rattling the reinforced safety glass of my booth. I had the small ceramic space heater running at my feet to combat the dampness seeping through the concrete floor. Traffic was virtually non-existent due to the travel advisories. Between 1 and 3 in the morning, I processed a total of 4 vehicles. At exactly 3:15 a.m., a dark blue, mid-2000s domestic sedan pulled into my cash lane. The headlights were heavily oxidized and dim, cutting poorly through the heavy rain. The vehicle came to a complete stop adjacent to my window. The driver rolled down his window. He was a white male, appearing to be in his late 40s or early 50s. He was wearing a faded gray hooded sweatshirt with the hood pulled up. He did not look in my direction. He kept his eyes fixed entirely straight ahead, staring blankly at the dashboard. Without speaking, he extended his arm and handed me a damp $10 bill to cover the standard $2.50 passenger vehicle toll. I took the currency, processed the transaction in the register, and handed back his $7.50 in change. He took the bills and coins, rolled up the window, and accelerated away from the plaza. The entire interaction took less than 15 seconds. It was a completely standard, procedural exchange. It was only after the vehicle had merged back into the single open lane of the highway that I looked down at the $10 bill he had given me. I had placed it on the stainless steel counter next to the register to dry before putting it in the till. The dampness on the paper was not from the rain. The substance was thick, dark, and slightly sticky to the touch. Under the harsh fluorescent light of my booth, it was undeniably blood. Furthermore, written across the top border of the bill in blue ballpoint ink, barely legible due to the smearing of the fluid, were 3 distinct words: trunk, please help. Turnpike Authority protocol dictates that we immediately lock down the booth and contact the State Highway Patrol dispatch in the event of any suspected emergency. I engaged the heavy deadbolt on the steel door and picked up the landline. I provided the central dispatcher with the vehicle description, the direction of travel, the exact time of the transaction, and the nature of the evidence. I could not provide a license plate number. The rear plate of the sedan had been obscured by a thick layer of wet mud. It was a detail I had noted subconsciously as the car pulled away, but had initially dismissed due to the severe weather conditions. 2 state trooper units arrived at my plaza 20 minutes later. I surrendered the altered currency to them as physical evidence. They informed me they had already set up a roadblock 20 miles north at the next available highway exit. I spent the remainder of my shift giving formal statements to a plainclothes investigator who arrived shortly after the marked units. I assumed the situation would be resolved quickly. There are absolutely no exits, rest stops, or turnoffs between my plaza and the location of their roadblock. At 6 a.m., my scheduled relief arrived to take over the lane. Before I left the property, the lead investigator updated me on the situation. The state police had not intercepted the dark blue sedan. They had driven the 20-mile stretch of highway in both directions twice. The vehicle was entirely gone. The turnpike in that specific section is heavily elevated. It is bordered by steep, reinforced concrete embankments that lead down into the state forest. There are several maintenance access roads along this route. They are heavily gated, secured with industrial padlocks, and used exclusively by utility crews for power line maintenance. The police found one of those heavy steel gates rammed open. Fresh tire tracks led down a steep, unpaved utility trail deep into the woods. The terrain is completely impassable for a standard, low-clearance sedan without causing severe immediate undercarriage damage. The tracks continued for a mile before disappearing into a low-lying ravine that was rapidly flooding from the storm runoff. The water level was rising too fast for a safe recovery operation. They never located the car. They never located the driver. The realization that I was the last confirmed person to interact with that vehicle, and whatever individual was trapped inside it, remains a factual reality I am forced to process every time I clock in for my shift. The brief, mundane transaction at my window was the final opportunity for intervention, and it passed entirely before I could comprehend what was actually happening. I spent 3 years employed as the night auditor for a franchised budget motor lodge on a state highway bypass. The property consisted of a main office building and 2 single-story wings of exterior corridor rooms arranged around a central parking lot. My shift ran from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. The environment was quiet, but extreme weather occasionally altered routines. A slow-moving storm system had triggered severe flash flood warnings across the county. Rain fell in heavy sheets, overloading the gutters and turning the asphalt parking lot into a shallow lake. We had low occupancy that night. Out of a total capacity of 60 rooms, perhaps 15 were rented. The physical isolation of the front desk during a major storm is notable. You are the only employee on site. At 2:40 in the morning, the infrared motion sensor in the lobby chimed. A man walked through the sliding double-glass doors. He was saturated. Water pooled rapidly around his heavy work boots on the lobby tile. He wore a thick canvas coat and a dark baseball cap pulled low over his forehead. He approached the front desk and requested a standard room for one night. I asked for his government-issued identification and a major credit card, which is standard procedure. He stated his wallet had been stolen at a nearby gas station, but he had cash to pay outright. He produced a soaked roll of $20 bills, company policy strictly prohibits renting rooms without valid identification. However, given the severe weather conditions and his apparent distress, I made a judgment call. I allowed the cash transaction to proceed, inputting a generic placeholder name into the computer. I assigned him room 114. This room was located at the far end of the south wing, facing the dense tree line. He took the key, thanked me briefly without making eye contact, and walked back out into the storm. I returned to my paperwork. At 4 o'clock, a localized power surge knocked out the main lighting array in the parking lot. The backup emergency floodlights activated immediately. I decided to perform a mandatory exterior perimeter check to ensure water was not breaching the ground floor rooms. I put on my rain gear and walked the north wing. Finding no issues, I inspected the south wing. When I reached the far end of the building, I noticed the heavy wooden door to room 114 was wide open. The interior lights were off. The wind was blowing rain directly into the room. I stood in the doorway and announced myself. There was no response. I retrieved my flashlight and stepped inside. The main living area was empty. The bed had not been touched. However, the bathroom door was ajar, and the overhead vanity light was on. I approached the bathroom cautiously. The white tile floor was covered in thick mud and wet leaves. The vinyl shower curtain was drawn closed. I pulled the curtain back. The tub was empty, but the white porcelain was heavily stained with muddy residue and a dark, rust-colored substance. The water was running, actively washing the thick mixture down the drain. I immediately exited the room, secured the door, and ran back to the front office. I locked the lobby doors and accessed the closed-circuit security camera system. I pulled up the primary feed for the south wing, rewinding to 2:45. The black and white footage showed the guest entering room 114. 10 minutes later, the door opened again. He did not walk toward the parking lot. He walked to the rear of the building, toward the unlit woods bordering the property line. He disappeared off camera. At 3:15, the camera captured him reappearing from the tree line. He was dragging a large, heavy object wrapped entirely in thick, dark plastic sheeting. The object was roughly the size of an adult human. He dragged the wrapped object down the concrete corridor and maneuvered it inside room 114. 30 minutes later, he exited the room alone. His hands were empty. He walked briskly across the flooded parking lot, bypassed the main road, and disappeared into the dense trees on the opposite side of the highway. I contacted the local sheriff's department immediately. Deputies arrived within 15 minutes, taped off room 114, and confiscated the hard drive containing the security footage. They spent the next 3 days combing the woods behind the property with specialized cadaver dogs. I was instructed by regional management to sign a non-disclosure agreement and not discuss the incident. The police never released a public statement regarding what they recovered in those woods. The motel was quietly sold to a commercial development firm 2 months later and subsequently demolished. I supplement my primary income by working as an independent contractor for a rideshare platform. I prefer driving late-night shifts on weekends. Passenger volume is lower, but fares are higher due to demand, and there is significantly less traffic. Last November, a heavy storm system battered the metropolitan area. High winds and driving rain caused widespread power outages in suburban sectors. By midnight, The surge pricing multiplier reached its maximum limit due to a severe lack of drivers willing to work in hazardous conditions. I accepted a fare located in a sprawling industrial park on the outskirts of the city. It is a grid of massive distribution warehouses and manufacturing plants, deserted and unlit at that hour. The designated pickup location was a boarded-up diner sitting alone on a frontage road. The cracked asphalt parking lot was full of deep potholes overflowing with rainwater. As I pulled my vehicle up to the curb, a figure stepped out from beneath the collapsed awning. It was a man wearing a dark, heavy raincoat. He opened the rear passenger door and slid into the back seat. I confirmed his name as it appeared on the app. He acknowledged it with a single nod. He did not speak. I checked the application for the drop-off location. It was not a standard street address. It was a specific set of raw GPS coordinates. The application mapped the coordinates to a location 20 miles away, deep in a rural, unincorporated sector of the neighboring county. I put the vehicle in drive and navigated back toward the main interstate. Transit time took 45 minutes. The weather worsened significantly. Rain hammered against the windshield so loudly it masked the sound of tires on wet pavement. The passenger remained unnaturally still. I routinely checked the rearview mirror, but the interior was too dark to see his face clearly. He registered only as a dark silhouette. The navigation system directed me off the main highway onto increasingly narrow, unlit county roads. Paved asphalt transitioned to rough gravel, then to a muddy dirt logging path flanked by closely packed pine trees. The headlights illuminated nothing but falling rain and overgrown brush. The application chimed, indicating we arrived at the coordinate destination. We were in the middle of nowhere. There were no houses, no streetlights, and no structures visible. I put the transmission in park and informed the passenger we reached the destination. He did not move immediately. He sat in the darkness for a full 10 seconds in complete silence. Then he unbuckled his seatbelt, stepped out into the deep mud, and shut the door softly. I did not wait to see his direction. I executed a tight turn and drove back down the logging road as fast as safety allowed. It took an hour to navigate back to the city limits. I pulled into a brightly lit gas station to refuel and inspect the interior for mud or water damage. I opened the rear passenger door. The upholstery was dry, but resting on the floorboard was a small, ruggedized digital audio voice recorder. Assuming the passenger had dropped it by mistake, I picked it up. The recording indicator light was inactive. I pressed the playback button to see if there was any identifying information. The audio file contained a single, continuous recording. It was a highly organized, step-by-step narration of my own daily routine. A calm, unfamiliar male voice detailed the exact time I left my apartment building that morning. The voice recited the license plate and vehicle identification number of my car. It described the specific coffee shop I stopped at, what I ordered, and exactly where I parked. The recording detailed my precise physical movements and locations over the past 3 consecutive days with absolute, chilling accuracy. The final entry on the recording was the most disturbing evidence. The calm voice stated my full legal name, date of birth, and apartment number, followed by a specific phrase: target acquired at Industrial Park, transit successful, commencing extraction protocol at coordinate point. I immediately locked the doors of my vehicle and drove directly to the nearest police precinct. I surrendered the recording device to the desk sergeant. Authorities treated the situation with extreme urgency. They traced the user account used to book the ride. The account was registered using a stolen credit card and a prepaid, untraceable burner phone. The GPS coordinates led investigators to a remote clearing in the woods. Police determined the earth in that clearing had been recently and deeply excavated. They refused to disclose further details regarding what they found at that site. I surrendered my vehicle to the Department for Forensic Processing. I broke my lease and moved out of my apartment the following week. I have not driven for any rideshare service since. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well if you can.